All right, an adjournment there at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry sitting at the Bridget Mabandla Justice College in Pretoria. On the stand today, Dr. Godfrey Lebeya, of course, the former DPCI or Hawks Head Lieutenant General Evidence Leader, Advocate Lee Siegels Ncube, has been taking us through two statements and his one of them being his sworn affidavit, of course, and the supplementary statement. His cross-examination will be dealt with at a later stage, and of course that date will be confirmed later, but the commission does resume tomorrow. And just briefly touching on some of the things that came out of that second statement, which was requested by the commission, including the multi-million rand Arrowton drug bust and, of course, Port Shepstone storage and major drug consignment theft there. On the latter part, in terms of the Port Shepstone, General Musikile's ultimate report made several recommendations, including that Lebeya appoint a senior functionary at the level of a major general to lead investigations to establish whether misconduct was committed in the handling and the storage of some of those exhibits. Now, Lebeya confirmed that the investigation was not done, but insisting that the investigation should have been initiated by KZN Hawks Head Lesija Senona at that particular time. He's also been addressing a number of other issues coming out of that supplementary statement, including how he handled the complaints against IDEC head Lieutenant IDEC head Andrea Johnson. Thembekile Mrototo monitoring those developments for us very closely. So Thembekile, today's proceedings were essentially meant to allow, of course, Dr. Lebeya to only read out those two statements into record, given that his cross-examination will then be set aside for a later date. I guess the level of clarity-seeking questions that we heard there from the commissioners give us just a scale of how much he will have to answer to when he is ultimately cross-examined, including, of course, decisions he took or chose not to take during his time as the national head of the Hawks.
Well, Nati, good afternoon. So there'll be plenty for the former head of the Hawks, Dr. Godfrey Lebeya, to deal with when he comes back to the Madlanga Commission for cross-examination, because right at the beginning we were told that in fact his statement, that very first statement that he read out, is possibly the longest that any of the witnesses here at the Commission have read before the start of their cross-examination. He's gone back, in fact, well over 10 years in terms of the internal dynamics and politics of the country's police service at a management level. But he's made it very clear that ultimately his mission here at the Commission is to clear his name. He's presented himself as a man of high integrity who does not, in his own words, associate himself with any criminality. Let's bring in SABC News senior reporter Canny Maphanga with me as always here at the Commission. Canny, so let's pick up on the latter issues that are being dealt with now. The drug busts came up again, especially that Port Shepstone one, where drugs were seized, taken to a Hawks facility that we now know was nowhere near equipped to keep those safe, so much so that they were in fact stolen at some point. And for Lebeya, the problem now appears to be that he may have ignored or failed to act on a recommendation by his then deputy to actually investigate whether members of the Hawks would have been involved in the theft.
Yes, and I think he relied on a substantiation that was too little in order to place before the probe that he had trusted a particular resolve, and that is why he took the decision that he took. He also is facing a number of issues with respect to the Colonel Rolofsa incident, and of course that protected disclosure and how he handled it with respect to the NDPP, Advocate Shamila Batoyi, and the kind of expectations that the Hawks officers that were working on this, because the allegation is overall that Johnson was, or the former IDAC head, Advocate Andrea Johnson, was allegedly protected in terms of the witness, I think it's witness O, protected disclosure. And that was the disclosure about the call to her via Major General Faraz Khan, where she was asked to furnish him with those particular documents that dealt with the criminal complaint that was made by another officer against Major General Faraz Khan. And the inference there is that it enabled him to prepare himself for that warning statement. And of course, in terms of the protected disclosure, it also prepared Johnson for her particular defense with respect to that conduct that fell outside of the scope of what is expected in terms of dealing with a complaint of this nature, and it raised questions or allegations of impropriety. So there are a number of incidents in which Dr. Godfrey Lebeya faces allegations of either a lack of leadership, a failure in oversight, but seemingly conducting or giving certain instructions that certainly do not make sense. And if you go back to the original complaint where you see Hawks feature, because the Hawks have featured quite a bit in the Madlanga Commission across several different themes. If you go back to the initial allegation, it was about the Katiso Molefe operation takedown, and it seems that he holds the posture that the mere call from an individual saying that there was an impersonation was enough for him to deploy to go verify. But we know that the scene was seemingly not as he relays to the commission. We know that through the evidence that allegedly even Hawks officers themselves, Tom's officers, were saying, why are we even here? This is a legitimate operation. Why are we still here? We have other work to do. And that is going to be something that he's going to have to explain, because something like verifying Hawks officers doesn't need the entire contingent to, descend on this one house. It could have been verified by the nearby police station. There's also something suspicious about the fact that those Hawks officers did not withdraw immediately upon finding out that these were legitimate officers conducting a legitimate operation. Absolutely. There was a lot of back and forth at that scene before those officers eventually left. Also, it was deeply chaotic, confrontational, and a scene that could have resulted in what he describes as friendly fire, because we understand it was a hostile environment for all the officers that were involved, and that a confrontation did take place, a heated confrontation took place at the house of Katiso Molefe, who, by the way, is implicated in the Amon Swart murder, which deals with a whistleblower in the tender fraud relating to Transnet. And that particular case has actually opened up the commission to the world of ballistics and how they were able to attach one firearm used in the Amon Swart scene to several other spates of murders in the Gauteng province, including that of the murder of popular musician DJ Somebody. So it's very serious allegations that the Hawks are facing, and at this stage you're dealing with a witness that holds the view that he had not done anything wrong in this particular regard. He even goes to the extent of painting a history of his career and how he's been dealt with when he was actually the one who would go against interference, or at least that's what the evidence suggests, and even goes to the extent of intimating certain things by referring to the relationship between three key individuals in this evidence is General Masimola, Lieutenant General Dumsani Khumalo, and KZN Top Cop, Lieutenant General Ntlatla Mkhwanazi. He paints them as a trio who allegedly have always looked after one another.
So they promoted and appointed
one another. And we know what the subtext of that particular statement is in the context of what he's being asked to answer to, because the PKTT was there to support the GCI ops when they pounced on that particular scene, because it was clear, Khumalo in his testimony stated that in terms of that particular environment and climate, because of what happened with the raids at Kat Matlala's home and how he had allegedly been given the heads up, they couldn't trust in that situation that it would be any different, which is why the PKTT comes in to this operation as well. So certainly when he returns, even though there's a lengthy statement and a supplementary, there's still a lot of answers that he will have to go through in order to test his version, but also verify if indeed there was nothing ulterior to it, because it still does not come clear as to why the Hawks went there and they stayed there for such a significant period of time, even though once they learned that that was a legitimate operation, they didn't pull out, and why he carries the expectation that Lieutenant General Dumsani Khumalo was supposed to inform him that there was an operation that was supposed to take place. So certainly with that evidence, it's still not clear yet. Even with all the Hawks officers that came before Lebeya to explain it, it was still chaotic and made no sense. And certainly with that incident, the incident of the protected disclosure, and other incidents that the Hawks have to answer to under Lebeya's watch. There's certainly more questions that will emerge when he returns at a date yet to be announced.
Something else that came up, the name of Paul O'Sullivan, this time coming up in the context of a call that Dr. Lebeya says he received, an inquiry, in fact, from Paul O'Sullivan related to the Phala investigation. And he says at the time O'Sullivan was basically with Bejani Chauke, who we know has worked even with the president closely within the ANC and government circles.
Yes, he mentions that. There's a lot of statements in the statement of General Lebeya that you don't understand what the relevance is or what he's trying to convey in that particular statement. But he does mention the call of Paul O'Sullivan, who he said that he was sitting with a Dr. Bejani Chauke about this particular matter. And I think that was in the realm of the topic or the theme of alleged interference when he was dealing with that particular theme and different instances thereof. Then he mentions that particular call as well. He also mentions calls from Brown Mkhotsi that he says he refused to answer. So it's one of those portions in the statement where it's not clear what he was trying to convey, but it's something that he's placing on the record. And then, of course, Paul O'Sullivan is a name that has featured quite prominently in the Madlanga Commission, particularly with certain cases, and, of course, Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi's initial allegations, how he responded to that, his alleged role in the Mukwele matter, and the emails that were sent. It featured more prominently in ad hoc, but his name still features here in terms of police matters and how you always seemingly find his name somewhere there in between. He also came to the commission to give his own evidence on his thoughts of infiltration, and stating that this was not a new phenomenon in the criminal justice system, and having a few choice words for Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi himself. Right. But this testimony of Lebeya not only intimates at those alleged factions that seemingly always emerge through this evidence, but it also intimates with respect to reforms the kind of structure you'll need in legislation to determine who are the custodians of organized crime or serious organized crime, however you want to phrase it, because it seems that the Hawks sometimes carry a similar mandate to organized crime within SABC and intelligence as well. And certainly we'll get an understanding as to what the true events or intentions were with the Katiso Katie Molefe incident. It's not so much about whether or not he knew Katiso Katie Molefe. It's about the intention behind that particular deployment of that size and stature to a simple operation takedown, where the nearby police station could have verified whether or not those Hawks officers were indeed impersonated, or was this a legitimate operation or not.
I am officially sweating bullets in this very hot auditorium here in Pretoria. But Kenny, I want us to talk about Lebeya's return. When he does come back, will he have a legal team or not? Because right at the beginning, the lawyers he's here with put it on record that ultimately he's funding this legal process, or at least representation for the commission himself. He'd asked for official assistance. He was granted for a different commission of inquiry that's currently underway, but not for this one. Why would there be such a difference in decision? I think it begs the question, right, from the people who would have approved perhaps government, shall we say, or state-funded, if that's the right word, legal representation, but also when he comes back without a lawyer, I wonder where that would leave him.
All right, so how I understood it is that Advocate Nwedo was just putting the what he described as a problematic dealing of his request before the Madlanga Commission on the record, even though we know that the Madlanga Commission has little to no room to intervene in a decision like that made by SABC. It seems that he requested for his representation to be fully funded, and the suggestion, how I understood it from his counsel, was that the person that adjudicated the matter was not appropriate in the sense that there could have allegedly been some bias. I think that's what he was dealing with in the submission to the Madlanga Commission, because he was stating that because he held a different view, that is, Lebeya held a different version in terms of the events of certain matters, he believes that is the reason why his request was declined. And I guess they were seeking the intervention of the Madlanga Commission, but I think their hands are tied in terms of those internal decisions and how decisions are made, whether or not a person will get funding, as many witnesses come through here, either get assistance from the Commission's legal team, or you bring your own lawyers, and of course that's at your own cost. I mean, it's not unique to Lebeya. There's several other witnesses that are footing their own bill before the Madlanga Commission.
Kenny, thank you very much. I just want to show everyone before we go that it's all been cleared up. The commissioners are gone. The evidence leaders have left. A new witness will sit in that box tomorrow then for a different chapter in the testimony that the Commission of Inquiry is hearing here in Pretoria. And we're hearing possibly that it could be a hugely significant person, but we'll wait for the Commission to update us on who exactly is going to appear tomorrow. For now, though, back to you, Unathi.
Thembekile, thank you so much for that. Thembekile Mrototo, together with our senior reporter, Canny Maphanga.